Check out FlipsideGaming.com for all your gaming needs. Use the promo code HEROES to save 10% on all orders over $10. Hey there, this is John from Heroes and Legends, and it's that time of the week again to go back and take a look at the results from the big tournaments. Last weekend, we had Star City Games Philadelphia, which consisted of a team open, which had players playing not only Standard, but also Modern and Legacy, and there were Classics for all three of those formats as well. This is also the first weekend that Throne of Eldraine is legal, and when it comes to Standard, this is the first weekend after the Standard rotation, so a lot has changed. We'll get into all of it. Quick reminder though, before we get started, FlipsideGaming.com has now added Throne of Eldraine singles to their website, so if you're looking to pick some cards up, remember you can go there, use that Heroes promo code, save some cash, and you also support the channel when you do that, which is always appreciated. Without any further ado though, let's get into it. We're going to begin as we always do with Standard and the Star City Games Team Open, so remember this is a team event, these teams weren't just playing Standard, they were also playing Modern and Legacy, so sometimes a weaker Standard deck could get propped up by a better Modern or Legacy build or vice versa. Just keep that in mind as we go through today's information. But these are the Standard decks your top 8 teams were playing. First place, third place, fifth place, sixth place, eighth place, Bant Golos. Okay? Second place, Golos Fires. Fourth place, Sultai Golos. And seventh place, Simic Midrange. One of these things is not like the other, but look at this top 8. 7 Golos builds in here. And these tend to be pretty drawn out games sometimes too with these particular builds, which could mean a very grindy Standard season if something doesn't change. Now, like I said, this is only week 1. Things could definitely evolve, and it is a team tournament. And later, we're going to look at the Star City Games Classic, and you did see a little more diversity there. And when you get beyond the top 8, there is some diversity. But at least for right now, it does look like these Golos strategies are the ones to beat. Let's take a look at some of these decks. First place, Bant Golos. Okay, so we'll just look at one copy of the Bant, and we'll look at the Sultai and the Fires too. You're going to see a lot of similarities, though. A wide variety of different lands, 4 copies of Field of the Dead. You will see a lot of cards from Throne of Eldraine in these builds. We'll get to that in just a second. But there's also cards that were in these strategies prior, like a Boreal Grazer, Hydroid Krasis, Growth Spiral, and so on. Let's take a look at the cards from Throne of Eldraine, though, that are here. These are all found in the main deck: Oko Thief of Crowns, Kenrith the Returned King, the Buy a Box promo, which can also be found in collector boosters, Realm Cloaked Giant, Fae of Wishes, Beanstalk Giant, Once Upon a Time, and Fabled Passage. Now, as you can imagine, a lot of different copies of this deck were played, but for the most part, the main decks were relatively consistent. Some did play Castle Vantress, though this one didn't. And here's a variety of other cards that many times you found coming out of the sideboard. Some of them were in the main deck of this previous build we looked at: Oko Thief of Crowns, Kenrith the Returned King, Realm Cloaked Giant, but you also found things here like Questing Beast, Mystical Dispute, which actually saw a lot of play this weekend, and Glass Casket. So does that Golos deck look boring? Well, here's a different one for you. Golos Fires. Maybe you'll like this one. It came in second place, and as you can see here, there's a lot of similarities. Hydroid Krasis, 4 Field of the Dead, a lot of different lands in there. You're going to see a lot of these same cards coming up over and over again, of course. But there is one really big glaring difference: Fires of Invention, which we're going to look at in just a second. So this deck is trying to levy Fires of Invention for extra value. Let's take a look at the cards from Throne of Eldraine that are here. You get Kenrith the Returned King again, Fae of Wishes this time, Beanstalk Giant comes back, as I mentioned, Fires of Invention, and Fabled Passage is here too. Fabled Passage was in a lot of Standard decks this weekend, which you'll see as we continue on. Okay, maybe those first 2 decks weren't for you, but how about the 4th place Sultai Golos deck? Okay, so again, just another twist on what we've been seeing. You are getting some different cards here, though. One of the more notable ones is Yurok the Desecrated, 2 copies of that in the main, so that way you get additional triggers off your Field of the Dead. And let's look at the cards from Throne of Eldraine. Not as many in this build. Once Upon a Time is there, Castle Locthwain, and Fabled Passage. In the sideboard, though, you will find Oko Thief of the Crowns. Okay, 7th place, Simic Midrange, the only deck in the top 8 that was not a Golos build. And as you can see here, a lot of new cards from Throne of Eldraine yet again. Let's take a look at what those were. Oko Thief of Crowns shows up again, Brazen Borrower, Gilded Goose, Questing Beast, Wicked Wolf, and Once Upon a Time. Out of the sideboard, you see Lovestruck Beast and Mystical Dispute. Some other variations on this deck were running Castle Garenbrig in the main. Let's move beyond the top 8 and look at what some other teams are playing in this event. The 10th place team was running Bant Midrange, so very similar to the Simic Midrange deck we were just looking at. But this does incorporate white, and there are some big cards you get for doing so. Tolsimir, Friend to Wolves, and Teferi Time Raveler are two of the better ones here. And let's go ahead and take a look at the cards from Throne of Eldraine. Out of the main, you get Oko, Thief of Crowns, Gilded Goose, Questing Beast, Wicked Wolf, and yes, even Marrow Leaf Pixie. Out of the sideboard, again, Mystical Dispute. Other variations on this deck were running Once Upon a Time and Fabled Passage in the main, and some were running Glass Casket out of the sideboard. 12th place team was playing Jeskai Fires, and one thing to point out here, there's only 14 cards in this sideboard that were listed by Star City Games. That is a reoccurring theme when it comes to pulling deck lists from their website, so whenever I find a discrepancy, I'll point it out to you. So there's a card missing here. Other than that, though, this might be a deck you're kind of familiar with if you've been playing a lot of Magic Arena. It seems to show up quite a bit. Basically, it hinges on Fires of Invention, just trying to use that for pure value, then digging through the deck to find what it needs when it needs it, withdrawn from Dreams, and then you have a lot of Planeswalker backups. So basically, you can still play your 2 spells on your turn, but then you get all these Planeswalker activations on top of it. Very powerful build, and it did pretty good here. Let's look at the new cards that are in this deck. You're going to find Fae of Wishes, Fires of Invention, of course, and Castle Vantress. Out of the sideboard, True Love's Kiss, Mystical Dispute, and Redcap Melee. Other variations on this build were running these cards in the main, the Royal Scions, Realm-Cloaked Giants, Bonecrusher Giants, and Fabled Passage. And sometimes you found these in the sideboard, Garrett Cursed Huntsman and Outlaw's Merriment. The Jeskai variety of this build will still run cards with black out of the board, since it can still play them with Fires of Invention. The 13th place team was playing 4-color Fires, a very similar deck here, so I won't spend a ton of time on it. Again, you're going to see Fires of Invention, this time 3 copies in the main, and a lot of Planeswalkers are here. This version does have ways to produce black mana, and does have some black cards in the main. Let's go ahead and see what is in the main here. The Royal Scions, Epic Downfall, and Fires of Invention. The 14th place team was running mono black aggro, and if you count up these cards, they are missing 4 cards in the main deck. I'm assuming those 4 cards are probably Spawn of Mayhem. Usually in these type of decks, you do find 4 copies of that card, so that could be what it is. With that being said, though, at least you get a feel for the rest of this deck. You get 4 copies of Drillbit in the main, and then a lot of aggressive creatures here. Footlight Fiend, Gutter Bones, Knight of the Ebon Legion. Let's take a look at the cards from Throne of Eldraine, though. Out of the main, you get Ayara, First of Locthwain, Blacklance Paragon, Murderous Rider, Rankle Master of Pranks, and Castle Locthwain. Now, other versions of this deck were also running Order of Midnight and Witch's Oven in the main, and some were running Deathless Knight out of the sideboard. The 21st place team also running a monocolored aggro deck, but this time it's red. You're going to find some Runaway Steamkins here, Scorched Spitters in the main, 2 copies of Experimental Frenzy in the main deck, 2 in the sideboard. Some cheap damage spells like Shock, Skewer the Critics light up the stage here to see more cards. What do we get from Throne of Eldraine? Bonecrusher Giants is here, Fervent Champion, Rimrock Knight, Torbrand Thane of Redfell, Slaying Fire, and Castle Embereth. Out of the sideboard, there's 2 more copies of Torbrand Thane of Redfell, and other variations of this deck were running Claim the Firstborn in the main. Okay, on to the Star City Games Standard Classic. Now, this is a smaller tournament, but it was just standard. Here's your top 8, a little more diversity here. Selesnya Adventures came in 1st place as well as 8th place. Bant Golos came in 2nd place. 3rd place was Golgari Adventures. That also came in 6th and 7th place, though. Simic Flash came in 4th. Jeskai Fires came in 5th. This time, the Adventures deck list kind of ruled the day, especially those Golgari ones. So let's take a look at some of these deck lists. Here's the 1st place Selesnya Adventures deck. The idea here is you're playing a lot of cards that are going to give you value. The adventure cards themselves are just value generators on their own. But then you're going to play things like Edgewall Innkeeper, which we'll look at in just a second, which is going to let you draw cards as you play creatures that have adventures attached to them. And beyond that, you have some economical creatures like Questing Beast, 4 copies. Again, we'll look at that one in a second. And even a Planeswalker in the main here with Gideon Blackblade, 1 copy. There's also 1 copy in the sideboard, though, too. Let's look at all the cards from Throne of Eldraine that are here. Fairy Guidemother makes it, Giant Killer, Shepherd of the Flock, Edgewater Innkeeper, like I mentioned, Flaxen Intruder, Lovestruck Beast, Questing Beast, like we talked, Once Upon a Time, and Castle Ardenvale. Out of the sideboard, you find Glass Casket. Now, some other versions of this deck are running extra Questing Beasts out of the sideboard as opposed to just running all 4 in the main, and also sometimes you find the Great Henge there, too. 3rd place is just a twist on what we looked at with Golgari Adventures, maybe a little more controlling. This allows you to bring in things like Assassin's Trophy, Legion's End right here in the main. Let's take a look at the cards, though, from the new set. Quite a few, again, as you can see here, but they're a little different. Foulmire Knight, Murderous Rider, Order of Midnight, Rankle, Master of Pranks, Edgewater Innkeeper, of course, is still here, Lovestruck Beast, Questing Beast, Once Upon a Time, and Fabled Passage. Out of the sideboard, you find Epic Downfall. Some other versions are running Lovestruck Beast out of the sideboard as opposed to the main. 4th place, Simic Flash. Okay, here's a deck you're probably pretty familiar with from last season in Standard, and a lot of the usual suspects are here. Brineborn Cutthroat, Frilled Mystic, Spectral Sailor. Let's see what Throne of Eldraine does bring to it, though. Quite a few cards, actually. Brazen Borrower is here, Wildborn Preserver, Once Upon a Time, and Castle Vantress. And in the side is Mystical Dispute. Okay, we'll go beyond the top 8 with Gruul Aggro, which came in 12th place. Now, just a quick note about this deck list. There's a big mistake here. All the cards that are in the sideboard, see those 15 cards? They're also listed in the main deck, obviously. They're not in both places. They're from the sideboard, actually. So, yeah, just another mistake here. Now, this is reminiscent of last season's Gruul Aggro deck in some ways. You're going to find cards here like Gruul Spellspeaker, Pelt Collector is in here, Skargon Hellkite, Zertog Goblin. But we also get cards from Throne of Eldraine. In the main, you're going to find Bone Crusher Giant, Robber of the Rich, Questing Beast, Once Upon a Time, and Castle Embereth. 14th place is a mid-range build, Teamer mid-range, and as you can see here, there's a lot of Planeswalkers. So you have things like Domri Anarch of Bolas, Nissa Who Shakes the World, Sarkhan the Masterless. Kind of feels like a Super Friends deck, actually. Let's go ahead and take a look at the cards from Throne of Eldraine, though. Couple more Planeswalkers, Oko Thief of Crowns, the Royal Scions are both here. Brazen Borrower, Bone Crusher Giant, Gilded Goose, Questing Beast, Once Upon a Time, and Castle Loch Twain. Mystical Dispute is happening in the sideboard. Okay, let's move on to Modern. We're going to go back to the Star City Games Open team event now. So remember, this one is the team event that was played with Standard and Legacy. But here's what the top 8 teams are playing when it comes to Modern. 1st place, Amulet Titan. 2nd place, we knew this was going to happen, Urza Outcome or Paradoxical Urza, that also came in 3rd place as well as 7th place. 4th place was 4-color Wurza, also known as Urza Thopter Sword. 5th place was Affinity. 6th place Titan Shift, and 8th place Mono Green Tron. Got a fair amount of diversity here, but can't help to notice those 3 copies of Urza Outcome in this top 8. Makes me wonder if that's an indication of anything to come. Now, we're going to look at some deck lists, but we're only going to look at deck lists that feature cards from Throne of Eldraine today. So if the decks have remained stable since before the new set came in, we're not going to necessarily zero in on those today. We are going to look at that 1st place Amulet Titan deck, and yes, even though at first glance it sure looks like an Amulet Titan deck, however, there are 2 cards here from Throne of Eldraine. 4 copies in the main of Once Upon a Time and 2 copies of Castle Garenbrig. Okay, here's what you've been waiting for. 2nd place Urza Outcome. Is it as good as everybody thought it would be? It's pretty good. Now, we'll have to see how the meta adjusts to this deck, but there's been a ton of buzz around it as people have been talking about how good this deck's going to be, waiting for Emery to come out so they can put them into their builds and take this to tournaments. But Emery is not the only card in the main deck from Throne of Eldraine. So let's quickly look at the deck and then we'll zero in on those cards. 4 copies of Urza, of course, 2 copies of Sai, 2 Saheeli Sublime Artificer, 3 Mox Ambers. That's worth noting because that number has been changing a little bit when it comes to these decks leading into this week. Sometimes you see 1, sometimes you see 4. This one was running 3. Let's go ahead and take a look at those Throne of Eldraine cards now. Emery, Lurker of the Loch, of course 4 copies in the main. Witching Well, though, also in the main, as well as Witchclaw Talisman. Out of the sideboard, you can find 4 copies of Oko Thief of Crowns. And some versions of this deck, not all of them, but some were running Mystic Sanctuary in the main. And some were running Mystical Dispute in the sideboard. Let's move on to the 5th place Affinity deck. This is more a classic build of Affinity. You get 4 copies of Steel Overseer here, 4 Arcbound Ravager, 2 Etched Champions. But there are a couple cards from Throne of Eldraine in the main. 4 copies of All That Glitters and 3 copies of Gingerbrute. The sideboard has Deafening Silence. And some other Affinity builds were running Emery, Lurker of the Loch in the main. 8th place was Mono Green Tron, and I was thinking to myself before Throne of Eldraine came out, we really need something to make this deck a little bit better. And they delivered with Once Upon a Time, 3 copies in the main of this particular build, just in case it wasn't consistent enough for you. 12th place was Humans, and I have to point out another mistake here. In the sideboard, there are 16 cards, so I'm assuming maybe it should be 2 Deputy of Detentions, or maybe one of those 2 should be 1s, but regardless, here's the rest of the deck list. And yeah, nothing too surprising here, it's a Humans deck. However, there is a card from Throne of Eldraine. Charming Prince, 3 copies in the main here. We'll keep moving beyond the top 8 with Azorius Control here, and this is a more classic version of Azorius Control. This is not running a Stoneblade package. There actually weren't that many Stoneblade decks or Stoneforge packages that performed well this weekend, believe it or not. Back to this deck, however, as you can see, 2 copies of Jace the Mind Sculptor, 2 Narset, 2 Big Teferi, 2 Little Teferi, 4 copies of Snapcaster Mage, a whole lot of control spells. And you are going to find Mystic Sanctuary here in the main. Titan Shift came in 16th place. Now, there was a Titan Shift deck that was in the top 8. That one wasn't running any cards from Throne of Eldraine, but this one was. What is that card, you ask? Just 1 copy of Castle Garenbrig. 21st place team was playing Jund Death Shadow with 4 copies of Death Shadow, 4 Tarmogoyf, 4 Street Wraith. You are going to get 2 copies of Liliana of the Veil in this particular build. Notice, though, no Dark Confidants here. However, there is a card from the new set. You're going to find Once Upon a Time yet again. Okay, on to the Star City Games Modern Classic. So this is not a team event, but it is a smaller tournament. Here is your top 8. Amulet Titan came in 1st place. Eldrazi Tron came in 2nd place. Pure Steel Combo came in 3rd place. Burn came in 4th. Mono Green Tron came in 5th. Infect came in 6th. Mono Red Prowess 7th. And Selesnya Eldrazi 8th. A lot of variety in this particular tournament. Again, we're going to look at some deck lists that were running cards from Throne of Eldraine that we haven't looked at already. 7th place was Mono Red Prowess. One note about this deck list, there are 64 cards listed. I'm sure in part there's some extra mountains here. But again, regardless of that, here's a look at the deck list. It hasn't really changed a whole lot. You have your prowess, aggressive creatures. You have your cheap spells to activate them and make them bigger. Things that also do damage on their own, like Lightning Bolt, Lava Dart, Gut Shot. Lava Spikes are in here. You get 4 light up the stage to see more cards again. So what do we get from Throne of Eldraine here? You get 1 copy of Merchant of the Veil in the main. We'll go to the 13th place Burn deck next, and this isn't the Burn deck with the best finish, but it does have a card from Throne of Eldraine. Also, you may notice there is a missing card in the sideboard of this deck list. The main deck is a classic Burn deck, as you can see, but in the sideboard there are 2 copies of Hushbringer. Alright, are you ready for some Legacy? So we're going back to that Star City Games Team Open again. This is the Legacy portion. So again, this is the team event, and here's what your top 8 teams are playing when it comes to Legacy. 1st place, as well as 3rd place and 7th place, Temur Delver. 2nd place was Niall Loam. 4th place, Jeskai Mentor. 5th place was Storm, 6th place Aloran, and 8th place was Dredge. Nothing too out of the ordinary here. Temur Delver continues to be very powerful in the format, but the big question, were there any cards from Throne of Eldraine here? And yes, there actually were. Let's take a look and see what deck lists they were in. 10th place, so nothing in the top 8, but the 10th place Azorius Stoneblade deck did have something. Now, it was a card that you can see in the sideboard, 2 copies. Mystical Dispute actually getting a little Legacy play. But wait, there's more. 12th place team playing Jeskai Mentor, and there was a Jeskai Mentor deck in the top 8, but that one was not running any cards from Throne of Eldraine. I wanted to point this one out because of 1 card that you'll find in the sideboard there. It's just a 1 of. It's Deafening Silence. Okay, we're going to look at the Temur Delver build that the 14th place team was running, again because it did have some Throne of Eldraine presence, even though obviously we saw 3 of these in the top 8 that were not running cards from the new set. However, let's see what this team brought from Throne. A copy of Brazen Borrower in the main. And this team wasn't doing it, but some were running Oko Thief of Crowns out of the main. On to the Star City Games Legacy Classic, again a smaller tournament here, but it was only Legacy, and here's your top 8. 1st place was Lands. 2nd place, Selesnya Depths. 3rd place, Turbo Depths. 4th place was Storm. 5th place, as well as 8th place, Temur Delver. 6th place, 4-color Delver, and 7th place, 4-color Control. Again, let's take a look at some deck lists that were running some Throne of Eldraine cards. Turbo Depths came in 3rd place, and yes, you're going to find a card here from the new set. And it is a card we've seen a lot of today. 4 copies of Once Upon a Time. 13th place, Naya Depths. Okay, there's 1 card in here, just a singleton from Throne of Eldraine. I'll give you a second to find it. A lot of cards to look through. Did you see it yet? Did you see it now? 1 copy of Claim the Firstborn in the main. Okay, that's our look at the results from the weekend. Now, later in the week, we are going to do a special edition of the Magic the Gathering Market Watch, just looking at Throne of Eldraine cards. We're going to see how the prices are trending on cards during a week where a lot of packs are being opened, but obviously there's still a mad scramble for a lot of cards as people are trying to build some of the deck lists that we saw in this video. But until next time, hey, thanks for watching. Please remember to like and subscribe and have a great day. Hey, thanks for watching. This video is made possible through the generous support of viewers like you on Patreon. Check out the description below for links to our Patreon page as well as our Amazon affiliate store, where a small percentage of all sales will also help support the channel. Finally, if you haven't had a chance yet to subscribe, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of the new videos on Heroes and Legends. Talk to you again soon, and have a great day.